Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Mrs. Bumbleflower. Mrs. Bumbleflower is a Bant 1 Legendary Rabbit Citizen with Vigilance. She is a 1/5 and says, whenever you cast a spell, target opponent draws a card. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It gains flying until end of turn. Then, if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you draw 2 cards. So this is just some good old-fashioned Bant group hug. So, why play Mrs. Bumbleflower? She's a super fun political commander. That's my opinion. I think making alliances by picking who draws what cards and then even having the option to put a 1/1 counter on our opponent's creatures, or ideally our own creatures, but still you can make multiple politics agreements like, oh, well, I'll let you draw a card if you don't attack me or whatever. It can do some really interesting game mechanics. Also, just putting a 1/1 counter on something whenever you cast a spell is super strong. It's super good. We're effectively drawing 3 cards on our turn because we're drawing for turn, and then we're drawing 2 cards when we cast our second spell with Mrs. Bumbleflower. And then just a 1/5 with Vigilance is a good body for blocking and attacking, especially when we're putting 1/1 counters on it and also giving it flying. So here's a game plan. We don't really need her to win. She's just kind of a fun politic piece and a good card draw engine. We're really just going to win through like win the game abilities, our opponents killing each other, and then us finishing the job with the remaining life. And then we also do have the very rare mill win, which we just force people to draw too much. So early game, we're just going to want to get like our rocks and value out, really like any mana doublers. We have a lot of them, just like our good card draw pieces, whatever. Mid game, we'll play her and then start politicking around, placing counters on our guys, drawing cards. And then late game, we're just going to want to pillow fort out, make it so it's really annoying or impossible to attack us, and then we'll either win the game or hopefully we've done nothing for so long that we can mill people out easy. So channel and deck stuff. The deck's pretty cheap actually. It's about $336 for a commander deck. That's not bad. If you need any of those cards, get them from the link down below. And then remember, subscribe to the channel, like, comment, do all that cool stuff. It always helps me out and I appreciate it. So, going into creatures, we have no planeswalkers. Edric, Spymaster of Trest. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. So, really, he just encourages our opponents to attack each other and not attack us. It's just incentive to hit someone else rather than us, because, like, well, if you hit us, we'll just take damage, and that is what it is. But if you hit someone else, they'll take damage, and then you'll draw a card. So, why wouldn't you do that? Essence Warden is nice just because whenever any creature enters the battlefield, we just gain a life. That's not just our battlefield, that's any opponent's battlefield. Just enters the battlefield, we gain life. We don't have a ton of life gain payoffs or anything, but it is nice just to be able to passively build up our life total because we don't have a ton of great blocking creatures and all that. We're just kind of hoping to have our opponents do our dirty work and then us finish them off. We have Eternal Witness just to get a card back from the grave. If we have like a fun card draw or whatever, a win the game piece that gets countered or removed, maybe we can get it back. Free Strider Lookout, I absolutely love in this deck. Reach, whenever you commit a crime, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and it only happens once each turn. Whenever you commit a crime, committing a crime is targeting an opponent's creature, targeting an opponent, or targeting a card in their graveyard, right? So we're targeting one of their permanents, them, or something in their grave, I believe. So whenever we cast a spell, we're just making an opponent draw a card. So we're triggering that. So it's even though our opponent's drawing a card, we're still getting a land out of it. It's good value. Heliod the Radiant Dawn is kind of the secret commander in this deck, just because we already have so many enchantments. But whenever he enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card from our grave to our hand that isn't a god. He's our only god, so it's irrelevant. And then you can pay 3 mana and then 2 life, because never pay mana for Phyrexian, to flip him over. And then he flips over to Heliod the Warped Eclipse. You may cast spells as though they had flash, and then spells you cast cost 1 less for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So it's super interesting because we already have so many card draw effects that force our opponents to draw, that make everyone draw. And when we do that, it just makes all of our cards cost 1 colorless less, which is great. And then we can also play everything at instant speed. So why ever do anything on our turn? We have Jace's Archivist, which is really good. It's fun. It's fun idea for the mill. It's on board with Group Hug, I think, in the sense you usually see Jace's Archivist in decks that, like, say, Nekusar, right? or cards that want to fill their own grave. But this card is nice because it makes each player mill and then draw. So it's kind of like, you're kind of like wheeling every single turn with it, which is kind of fun. And that can like fill up graves really, really quick. Queen is kind of cool just because we tap them and each player can draw a card and gain a life. I don't know about you guys. If someone taps Queen and I'm their opponent, I'm almost always drawing a card and gaining a life. There's like almost no reason not to do that. Until there's reasons not to do that when you have like 10 cards in your deck. Lauren's really nice. Vigilance enters the battlefield, pop an artifact or enchantment, which is already really good. And then we can have you and target opponent each draw a card. It's just good group hug. It's good politics. Because again, we're not really winning in a traditional way, right? We're winning by having people ignore us and having people do our dirty work by making deals with them. Being like, oh yeah, I'll tap Queen during your turn, and then you can draw a card. And where I can tap Lauren, and then I'll have you draw a card if you don't bother me. So you can kind of make these cool deals. It's like, well, how about during your turn you can draw 2 cards, but you ignore me. You don't bother me or whatever. Or you can go to someone else's turn and say, oh, you know, Jace's Archivist. I'll wheel on your turn if you have a bad hand and see if you can do anything. It's really neat. Noble Hierarchist, it's really good for the deck. It's a mana dork and it has Exalted. Taps for all of our colors. Exalted's cool because we're probably just gonna load up, in my opinion, probably just Mrs. Bumbleflower with counters. And then just attack out. She's a 1/5 if someone wants to kill her, whatever. We don't really need her that much anyway. She's just good draw. And it'll just give her +1/+1 whenever the creature attacks alone. Again, maybe even if it's not Bumbleflower we're loading everything up on, we're probably not attacking with many creatures anyway, so if we're just swinging out with one guy, it's nice to have them a little bit bigger on top of ManaDor. Orzhov Advocates is cool because our opponents on our turn get to pick if they either put 2 counters on one of their guys or if they can't attack us until their next turn, which is really neat, or our next turn rather. So it's either they get 2 counters, which is fine because they're going to beat down each other, or they're not going to attack us, which is also ideal. Selvala, the Explorer and Returned, bleh. She has Parlay. Parlay says tap it. You know, each player reveals the top card of their library. For each non-land card revealed this way, you add a green and then gain a life, and then each player draws a card. Selvala's cool just because she gains us a life, or gains us a couple life, gets us a couple more mana, and then she also draws us a card. So she's like a mana dork, life gain, and just card draw, all in one. Socrates, Athenian Teacher, is super cool because he's a really neat combat trick politic piece. So he's Defender Hexproof when he's untapped, and then we can tap him until end of turn. Target creature gets if this creature would deal damage to a player, prevent it, and then that creature's controller and that player each draw half that many cards rounded down. So it's forced card draw. It's also a fog if we need it. Fogs are just prevent all combat damage, which is nice. It's just good to be like, oh, you're doing a weird attack on us. How about like we draw some cards? Or it's like, ooh, you're about to kill one of our opponents, but I need them alive to be able to kill you later too. You're just not low enough yet. Maybe they'll be living too. It's good. Soul Warden's really nice just because same thing as Essence Warden. Creature enters, we gain a life. It really just helps us keeps us alive for a while. Council of the Four is super good in group hug decks because the nature of group hug is that it gives your opponents a lot of resources, right? And when they have a lot of resources, they're casting multiple spells a turn and they're drawing multiple cards a turn, right? So Council of the Four is great because whenever a player draws their second card, we draw a card, and then whenever they cast their second spell, we'll get a knight. Sorry, their second spell, we'll get a knight. So it's kind of, our opponents are just going to be passively fueling our own board. It's also a 0/8. Who wants to attack into that? Like, it's neat. It's good. The second Doctor to give players no max hand size, and then at the beginning of your end step, each player can draw a card, and then each player that does just can't attack us, which is good. Again, we're group hug. Having no max hand size is also really nice, but yeah, I feel like the temptation of just not, because I feel like a lot of people aren't going to want to attack us anyways, just because we're planning on pillow forting out a little bit, so they're just going to be doing this. So it's just kind of double. It's like double insurance. Timeless Witness and Eternal Witness are the same thing. The only difference is you can eternalize Timeless Witness, and it'll come back as a 4/4 token, but then you exile from your grave. Triska Decaphile is a fun way to win the game. We just have no max hand size, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have exactly 13 cards in our hand, we win, and then we can pay 4 mana and draw a card. So if we're close on our turn, if we have like, what, 12 cards on our turn, we could, or 10 cards on our turn, we could always dump some mana into this, which isn't really even unheard of. Even though 12's a lot, we have a lot of mana doublers, so it's very possible. And we're also drawing a lot with our commander anyways. So that's just like a fun, cheeky way to win the game. Again, not game-breaking or anything, it's just kind of neat. Wandering Archaic, whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, they may pay 2 mana. If they don't, we can copy it and then choose new targets. So it's good because it taxes our opponent a little bit, because we're going to give them like a lot of like mana doublers and stuff. So just having any kind of tax is good. And then even if they choose to cast it, and then we don't have to cast it, is what I'm trying to say. Is they can not pay the 2 mana, and they can say, yeah, you can cast it, and we can be like, nah, I'm good, which is nice. The flip side of it is pretty good for group hug. Almost no one I've never seen the flip side be played actually, because it's not good, except in group hug. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of their library, reveals a land and or an instant or sorcery card from among them, and puts it into their hand, and the rest on the bottom, and then everyone gains 3. Cool. Windborne Muse is just creatures can't attack us unless they pay 2. That's kind of it. Who wants to, like, it kind of like cards like these shut down token decks. They shut down like any kind of go wide. It's also kind of annoying because if someone's like, yeah, I want to cast spells during my turn, it's like I now can't attack this player because I simply don't have the mana to do it. Going into sorceries, Approach the Second Sun is a classic and probably one of the most realistic ways we'll win the game. If Approach the Second Sun was cast from your hand and you've cast another spell named Approach the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach the Second Sun on top of its library, 7th from the top, and we gain 7. I think it's fine just because we're going to have a lot of mana and we're going to have a lot of card draw anyways. So just this going like 7th from the top, we'll be able to get there in like a turn or 2 and then just recast it and hopefully win. Which is kind of neat. Clear the Mind is a weird card. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library and then draw a card. Why would we run this? It's because we have a lot of card draw. And a lot of card draw means usually a good amount of discarding. It also means that we're going to be doing a lot of milling with like things like Jace's Archivist and whatever, right? Passive stuff through that, or even just casting spells, having our stuff die, since we're doing so much more of that, it can really fill our grave. Being able to shuffle our grave into our library is good anyways. Additionally, since we're doing a lot of like decent like milling and card draw, if an opponent is benefiting off that through a Reanimator or a Grave deck, this is kind of a way to shut that down. Collective Voyage is excellent just because you pay any amount of mana and then everyone gets that many lands. So you pay 1 mana and then everyone starts chipping in and then everyone gets that many basic lands tapped, which is super good. Because the way I like this card is I always imagine everyone puts in like 1 or 2, right? Because it's like, why wouldn't I want to land, right? Some people are going to be stingy and they're just going to pay nothing and then benefit off of it, but what's the fun in that? Either way, we're getting a lot of lands. And more importantly, we're thinning our deck because we're not really running a lot of ways to play multiple lands a turn, just because we have cards like Collective Voyage and we have like so much card draw and we have so much ramp that we don't really need it. Gaia's Blessing is another one of those funny target player shuffles some cards in their deck. It lets us draw a card, but also, importantly, it prevents us from being milled out. So it's kind of nice because if someone's playing mill, it kind of protects us, but it's really nice. I guess it quote unquote goes infinite with Gaia's Blessing and Clear the Mind just because they can keep shuffling each other back and forth, which is good. But yeah, it's pretty much just to stop problematic graves. Mind's Aglow is the same exact thing as Collective Voyage. Just wanted to double check the name. But it's this card draw. Instead of getting lands, everyone draws that many cards. Nature's Lore is good. Search your library for a forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield. With this, we're going to get our shock land. We're going to get a Triumph early game. We're going to get our shock lands mid game. Or just basic forests. The interesting thing I want to say about Nature's Lore compared to other decks where I run Nature's Lore in 3 visits, because they're the same exact card. In decks where you have mana doublers, right? This can either be a free card or it can be net positive. If we have 2 mana doublers on the field, we're basically paying 2 mana to just get a shock land. We only have to get a shock land, just get a forest. and then just have it be untapped, pretty much. Just like, and then we'll net gain mana off that, because if our lands each tap for 3, then we're just like, cool, we've paid 2 mana and we've netted 1 mana off this exchange, essentially. It's kind of neat. Prosperity, each player draws X cards. We can make that be a lot. We can force the game into draws with this cards. When we have this much mana, Prosperity can kind of end games in good or bad. It can also kill people too. If we have a lot of cards, or sorry, if an opponent has less cards than we do, and then we can kill them with this. Just making them mill themselves out by being like, oh yeah, Prosperity X is like 15. Like, and again, I know 15 sounds like a lot, but when we're in group hug and we have a lot of like lands, constantly getting lands, drawing a lot of cards, like with mana doublers, it's not unheard of. Tempt with Discovery is super cool. I've always fall for Tempt with Discovery. The long short of it is 4 mana, search your deck for a land card, right? Any land card and put it onto the battlefield untapped, unless it says enters tapped, obviously. Then each opponent can do the same, but if they do it, you get an additional land. If every opponent does it, the spell is effectively free, and you have your 4 best lands from your deck onto the field. Very, very cool. And then 3 visits is just Nature's Lore. Windfall, classic, just classic. It's literally just a wheel. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. The cool thing about this, though, is since a lot of players will have no max hand size, we will have a very big hand because we have cards that say we have no max hand size. The cool thing is that usually X is like 6 or 7. Now X is going to be like 15. Like 15, people are bidding 15 and drawing 15. It's going to be really neat. Just going into some instance, Arcane Denial, just counter spell. They draw 2 cards, we draw 1 card. It's a good counter spell. It's easy to cast in 3 colors, and it's group hug. We draw cards. Blessed Respite, as an instant to make target player shuffle their grave into their library and then prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. So the thing is we go shields down pretty often because we invest a lot of resources into making group hug happen that we are vulnerable to just dying if someone has like enough stuff or if we don't pillow fort out quick enough. So running a fog or 2 is still good, and this one just preventing combat or shuffling their grave is also kind of going along with the mill plan. Counterspell, it's a counterspell, get rid of something we don't like. Because even though we are group hug, we got our limits. Doen Veto, it's a counterspell that can't be countered, but only for non-creature spells. Everybody Lives is such a funny card. All creatures gain indestructible and hexproof. Players gain hexproof. Players can't lose life this turn. They can't lose the game, and no one can win the game this turn. Everybody Lives is super good because it's like a turbo fog, right? It's also good for preventing infinite like damage or whatever. If someone's like, yeah, I'm gonna go infinite and deal like infinite damage with like Comet Storm, or if they make infinite tokens and give them haste, or like they do whatever, it's like, oh well, you gotta wait a turn. You gotta wait a turn, and we'll see if someone can draw a nuke. Fog is also just good. Just it's literally the staple fog. Prevent all combat damage that'll be dealt. It is fog. It is itself. It's great. Also, I want to say the reason I'm running these like fogs are no one expects them. No one ever expects a fog other than Teferi's Protection. Like, but then again, like they're expecting Teferi's Protection. Like you can see the 3 wide open, but like fog, who's thinking of that? And then we have Teferi's Protection, the last fog. It's just the super fog. It's super good. Going into artifacts, we have Arcane Signet just for mana rock. Crawl space, no more than 2 creatures can attack us each combat, which is good, just because we want to be able to tax them. And even if we don't have, it's just basically like a way we can like pillow fort out. Is like, if someone attacks us, we'll just jump block with like 2 guys, whatever. Folio of Fancies is one of my favorite cards in this deck. Players have no max hand size for 2 mana. Then XX, tap it, each player draws X cards. Then pay 3 and tap it, each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their deck. Basically, each opponent mills cards equal to the number of cards in their hand. So when you have no max hand size and you're just like making everyone draw a ton with like Prosperity and even Folio Fancies, paying 10 in the Folio Fancies makes everyone draw 5 and then tap it, and then oof, you can do a lot of milling with that really easy, and you just do it every turn. Howling Mind's good, just makes everyone draw an extra card on their turn. I don't really think there's any way to keep it tapped, so not really what we're worried about. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. We are also running all of the Talismans. The Talismans are good just because the They tap for our colors, just colorless if we need it, or just tap for a color by taking 1 damage, and like 1 damage really isn't that much. Temple Bell is good. Give me a second. Temple Bell is good just because it just forces everyone to draw a card. Some of them are optional, but this is forced. And then our final artifact is Doen Ory. You may play non-land cards at any time you could play an instant. It basically just gives all our stuff flash, which is good. Because ideally we don't want to be doing stuff during our turn, we want to be doing it during our opponent's turn. Going into the big part of the deck, the enchantments, we have Dictated Karametra, which has flash. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of his or her, basically it's a mana doubler. Dictated Crucifix is a flash, everyone draws an extra card on their draw step. Forced Fruition I think is absolutely hilarious. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards. That's rough. That's really rough. Because the way you can read it, right, and maybe I'm a psycho for thinking it, but whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player mills 7 effectively. They're going to have to effectively do a worse mill 7, because instead of going straight to the grave, it's going to have to go to their hand. If they don't have a max hand size, they're going to have to discard down the hand size. Sure, it's filtering, but whatever. But if they're casting multiple cards a turn, like, even if they just cast 2 cards a turn, you're milling like a 10th of your deck, more than a 10th of your deck. Actually, way more than that, because you're going to start your draw, you're going to start your turn with 7 cards, and then you're going to draw an 8th on the start of your turn, right? So you're basically starting your deck with like 90 cards. So it's even more than that. It can kind of be silly. Ghostly Prison, just creatures can't attack us unless they pay 2. It's a good prison effect, hence the name, Ghostly Prison. We have Heartbeat of Spring, whenever it's a mana doubler for everyone, which is good, because we want to tap for a lot of mana, because we have a lot of X stuff. Helix Pinnacle is the Pinnacle X spell. 1 mana enchantment, Shroud, X, put X tower counters on Helix Pinnacle. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more counters on Helix Pinnacle, you win the game. I love this card. Mana doubling is great. Being able to get a lot of lands from our deck with like Temp with whatever, or Temp with Discovery, and all that good stuff, Collective Voyage, is great. And the fact that we can do it instant speed, just being able to be like, oh yeah, end of your turn before I start mine, I'll tap 5, put 5 counters on it. It's a slow and steady burn, but with all like, normally it's a slow and steady burn, but with like all the mana doublers and stuff, we can like make this very possible. Also, before this triggers on our upkeep, if we can win, we could just dump everything out and see how many counters we can put on it with all our untapped lands, if we're close enough, which is kind of nice. Leyline of Anticipation, we can start with it on the battlefield if it's in our opening hand, and then our spells have flash. We like our spells having flash, and if we can play it for free, even better. In my opinion, it's just better Doen Ory, so why not? Mirage Wake is a creature lord, and then it just is a mana doubler for us. It's huge. It's good. We have a lot of mana doublers because we want to have a lot of mana. And the nice thing about Mirage Wake is it's a one-sided mana doubler. Propaganda, just another Ghostly Prison effect. It's the same exact thing, but blue. Because again, we don't want creatures attacking us, and assuming we have Propaganda and Ghostly Prison on the battlefield, it's like every creature has to pay 4 to attack us. Like, who wants to do that? Ristic Study, just another tax ability. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. We'll draw a lot of cards. Rites of Flourishing, to let everyone draw an additional card on their turn and play an additional land on their turn. It's just short, sweet, to the point. It's good ramp in a way. It helps our opponents, but I mean, hey, group hug games are usually pretty quick. Smothering Tithe is an absolute necessity in this deck. I know I put Smothering Tithe in basically every white deck I make, but I'll be honest, guys, Smothering Tithe is a requirement for this deck. The amount of drawing we make everyone do, even with just our commander, it's like, oh, we cast a spell, you draw a card, haha. That turns into, hey, since you drew a card, do you want to pay 2 mana, or do you want to give us a treasure? Then we have cards like Jace's Archivist, where we make everyone draw a bunch of cards and discard a bunch of cards. Anything that makes everyone draw a lot of cards is huge. Like, it's basically a ritual. Because even think of, like, let's take Smothering Tithe and any wheel, right? A 7 wheel. We make each opponent draw 7 cards and discard 7 and then draw 7. They now drew 7. That is effectively 21 Smothering Tithe triggers happening, which could potentially be 21 treasures happening. And I'll be honest, our opponents, even with mana doublers, aren't paying for all of that. So Smothering Tithe is definitely huge. Solitary Confinement is really great. At the beginning of our upkeep, sacrifice it unless we discard a card. Oh, that's rough, and we also have to skip our draw step. However, it gives us Shroud, and it prevents all damage that will be dealt to us. The cool thing about Solitary Confinement is that we're basically protected indefinitely, and yeah, it sucks that we have to discard a card and we skip our draw step, but it's not forever. I mean, but we also draw a ton of cards in this deck. We have Temple Bells, we have Queens, we have a million things that draw us a million different cards. Even our commander will just draw us 2 cards a turn. Like, that's always going to keep us net positive, and probably we're just going to discard lands anyways. So Solitary Confinement is an absolute all-star in this deck. Seer Safety, I believe we have like 17, anywhere from 15 to 17 enchantments. Creatures can attack you unless they pay X, or X is the number of enchantments you control per creature. So it's like a super ghostly prison. It's great. It practically, when this is on the field, you're almost untouchable. Struggle for Project Purity is a great card. However, it's very dependent on what pod you're playing in. It depends what your opponents are playing. For example, so let's go through it. Brotherhood. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. You draw a card for each card drawn this way. So, okay, we go to our upkeep. We draw a card. If everyone wants to draw a card, we basically draw an extra 4 cards. We drew 5 cards. Great. Enclave. Whenever a player attacks you with 1 or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters. It's kind of like a weird Sphere Safety effect where it doesn't exactly protect us, but it definitely de-incentivizes them. So they're going to get 2 counter, or twice that many really 2 rad counters per attacking creature, right? If they swing out, could straight up potentially kill them. Even if they attack with 5 creatures, 5 creatures means 10 rad counters. 10 rad counters means on their turn, they're going to mill 10 and then take damage equal number of non-lands they milled. And then it's just going to keep happening and happening. So if you're going with an aggressive pod, pick Enclave. If you're going with kind of like a more, everyone's kind of doing their own thing, pick Brotherhood. Telepathy, I think, is absolutely hilarious. Just your opponents play with their hand revealed. Your opponents play with their hands revealed. It's very good because we're making them draw a lot of cards. So why shouldn't we be able to just take a little peek, right? It's also really great because since it's not us, it's just our opponents. That means everyone can see everything except our cards. So there's no more combat tricks. There's no more counters. Everything is just out in the open, right? It's out in the open. So it's, maybe I won't play this because that guy just has a counter spell. Or maybe I won't play this because she's just going to kill my dude, right? It's a great card. Another really good thing about Telepathy, and it's kind of more of a meta thing about Telepathy, is that no one wants to waste their enchantment removal on Telepathy. It's a one, and even if they do, it's a 1-mana enchantment for us. Like, people don't want to waste removal just on something so small. Finally, Wilderness Reclamation. At the beginning of your end step, just untap all lands we control. It's nice to be able to go nuts during our turn and then still be protected with everything when we pass. So it's kind of like we never spent any mana. Going into lands, we're not doing anything crazy. We're just running all the shock lands because they're fetchable. All of the Vow lands just because they're most likely going to enter untapped. All of the check lands just because we're pretty basic heavy. I think we have 6 of each basic. And then going into lands, we have Alchemist Refuge. Really just so we can pay Simic and let us cast our spells as though they had flash. I think when we have a lot of mana doublers, the 2 is really like hardly even a cost just to whip everything out at instant speed. Very nice. Command Tower, it's Command Tower taps for all our colors. Exotic Orchard's really good just because the likelihood that one of our opponents is playing, Bant or has like mana fixing, or like for colors like Chromatic Lantern or whatever, is very high. It's almost always an untapped dual land or more. Forbidden Orchard, taps for a mana of any color, and whenever we tap it, target opponent gets a funny little spirit, which is, again, it's a fun politic piece on a land of like, I'll give you this spirit, why not? Just don't bother me. Hall of Heliod's Generosity, just because we have so many enchantments to be able to recur them. Maze of Ith is a fun little fog effect for 1 creature, prevents people from winning with commander damage, just untaps the attacking creature, prevents all the damage, which is really nice. But it doesn't tap for a mana. Then we have Reliquary Tower to give us no max hand size, Spar's Headquarters to be our Triumph, to pay it turn 1, we could fetch it, cycle it later on if we draw it, whatever. Yavi Maya, Cradle of Growth, is to make each land a forest in addition to its other types, which is great because it now makes Maze of Ith be able to tap for mana because it'll make it tap for a green. Same thing with Reliquary Tower. I believe we have 6 of each basic, just straight, short, sweet, and to the point. And that is all I got for you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Get the cards you need down from the link below. Remember to always subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you next time.